Further debate, the member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am glad to be able to add comments to Bill 164, an act to amend the Human Rights Code with respect to immigration status, genetic characteristics, police records, and social conditions. And Speaker, I bring thoughts to this based on my experience, both as having served as the critic for community safety and correctional services, but also serving as our party critic for citizenship and immigration. But beyond those, beyond that, I have thoughts that I'm gaining from my constituency, from real people who walk through my door on a regular basis and their lived experience. And I'm very glad to be able to talk about a strong human rights framework. And as the member from Ottawa, Vanier, talked about, that to have human rights protections and a human rights code that reflects a good and a fair, relevant framework that is going to evolve with our society, I think should be our goal. So in today's case, we are talking about amending the Human Rights Code with respect to immigration status, genetic characteristics, police records, social conditions, with respect to services and goods and facilities, occupancy of accommodation, the right to contract, employment and membership in various organizations. Basically, giving folks additional protections that they cannot be discriminated against out in our communities. And as I hear from folks who walk through my constituency office door on a regular basis, these insidious discriminations or discriminating experiences are happening on a regular basis. Whether it's someone who can't get a job because, as we're talking about, because they're poor, because of the way that they are able to present themselves, whether it's a matter of police record that someone is wanting to start fresh, that they've served their time, that they are trying to turn the page, and that they are not having that success. We are always here to defend and protect folks in our communities, and adding these layers, I think, of course, is the right thing to do. But I'm going to, so saying that, and saying that, yes, we support adding these amendments, I'm going to take the opportunity to imagine a few other things that we could change as well, Speaker. When it comes to immigration status and adding protections against discrimination, absolutely we should be doing that. But my party leader, Andrea Horwath, back in January, wrote a letter to the Premier and saying that Ontario needed to step up and lead at that time, and said, quote, "I urge you to declare Ontario to be a sanctuary province. In recent years, cities like Toronto and Hamilton have shown tremendous leadership by making local services accessible to all residents, regardless of their immigration status. Now our province must do the same. We must guarantee that services will always be accessible to everyone in Ontario." And she goes on to say that our communities are always stronger and safer when we are welcoming, inclusive, and when no one lives in fear. End quote. I bring that forward because, as we see here, adding this into the Human Rights Code essentially codifies a sanctuary province, that folks need to have access to services when they need them, and that the immigration process is a tangled one, that it takes a long time to navigate, but people might be in need today. But we hear things through our communities as well. Housing discrimination is rampant, especially as we are reaching month 13 and the federal responsibility for our new Syrian families is coming to an end, and then the responsibility falls to the province, and their protections evaporate. That we have, landlords and different folks who are discriminating on a regular basis, and we need to guard against that. But I'll also say that while we're talking about immigration status, we have immigration detention centres that are federal. But my understanding is that some of the children that are living there with their parents or guardians in flux, they're Canadian children, Ontario's jurisdiction, and my understanding is, Speaker, they actually don't have access to provincial education right now. Pardon? Yeah, that's what I said. That it's my understanding that there are Canadian-born children living with their parents who are in immigration flux at our federal detention centres provincial responsibility not having access to education. So I'd like the government to take that back and look into it and fix it, because that's, are we discriminating as a province? I would challenge us not to. But also, we have federal immigration detainees, again, federal responsibility, that we are housing in our jails, and we have a government that keeps signing that agreement year after year and says, don't worry, we'll tuck them over here. They're being discriminated against systematically, and we're turning a blind eye. So I would, again, challenge us to fix that. Genetic characteristics. This is an interesting one. I've had members from our communities of color, the Jewish community, have lobbied on this issue about genetic discrimination. So I'm very glad to see us having this conversation, that folks who are, I mean, it should always be about an individual's health and well-being. So if someone would like to take a genetic test to learn more about their own, their own health and not sensitivities, but predispositions or things like that, that in no way should that personal health information be used against them when it comes to insurance, when it comes to employment. Sickle cell as a marker, the BRCA4 gene, that is a breast cancer gene, that sort of marks community members. And for employers to look at that and say, oh, that person might be a person of color if they've got this gene, that might, or this cultural community, I'm not going to hire them. No, 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 that cannot be a thing. When it comes to police records, we recognize that youth are young offenders, that their records are sealed, that they're able to turn the page, to start a new chapter, start a new journey, and we want them to be able to do that fresh and without discrimination. But we should be having that conversation, as the member opposite talked about, that we want to ensure that people are treated fairly, that folks who come out of our different law enforcement systems, who come back into our communities, that they have the opportunity to participate fairly and fully. Social conditions. So I appreciated that the member opposite said that this is essentially long overdue, that there are other jurisdictions who have already said that social conditions cannot be a grounds for discrimination, and we protect against that. To disadvantage folks unfairly due to their employment status or source or level of income, housing status or level of education, that is wrong. But I'll say that, and I don't think I'm getting any argument from anyone in this room, poverty is a part of such a massive story and problem. If we are not encouraging affordable housing and development, if we are not looking at providing dental to more folks, we are continuing to further disadvantage them. So I'm glad we're talking about you can't discriminate against them, but also where is the preventative side? I would like us to tackle that as a legislature. We have a wonderful facility in my riding called the Refuge, and they support and work with street-involved youth, homeless youth, and they do wonderful work with them and help them on the next steps of their journey as they're integrating and reintegrating into our community. But I remember meeting a young man, very bright, capable. I wish I knew kind of what had happened on his journey. But I remember that looking at this young man and recognizing, and I recognize potential, but then I'm a teacher, I can't help it. This is an individual who clearly had never had access to dental care, was a resilient youth who's been living on the streets and in and out of systems, but never had access to dental care, and so doesn't have a customer service smile, and was meeting with barriers and obstacles to employment strictly on the basis of his lack of dental care and access all along the way was a barrier to employment. So how do you say to an employer, you can't discriminate against him based on poverty? How do you ensure that this individual gets a fair shake when so many pieces come into that? So I think part of the protecting against discrimination would be preventing the opportunity to discriminate. So would talk about raising the minimum wage, bringing more people out of poverty, giving people more access to opportunity. We have folks who are just drowning in debt, who don't have access to affordable accommodation, we have to look at that as well, because when we're part of a system that is forcing people to live without options and to live without opportunity, then we're not being fair at the beginning. We are not giving them a fair shake. We are not helping them. So after the fact, I appreciate the need. I do. I respect this piece of legislation. We as a party support these amendments, that we want more people to have those protections, but we want more people to have the support all along the way. Back to the police records, actually. This was a conversation that came up the other day with the meeting with some folks who have been through our care system, who had been youth in care. And now they're on the other side of that. They're adults participating in our community. But one of the things they brought up was that their records were public. So when we talk about young offenders' records are sealed, theirs aren't. And they're concerned for the same, this same conversation, that this is a group of youth or adults who had been in care in our province and now might be discriminated against because there's as they said, a stigma attached, that people might judge their background. Family status is something we already, guard against that is the grounds for discrimination. But again, anywhere that we identify a preventative measure so that folks don't have to then, who will never be discriminated against on those grounds because they can't happen because we look after them and protect them, I would like to see more of that. So I applaud the member from Ottawa-Vanier. I also would like to say I've appreciated the work that she's done before coming to this legislature. I will forever be confused why she ran for the Liberals and not for the NDP, but we support this piece of legislation. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.